Hello, in this video I'm going to discuss how to solve derivation 10004. So as always, our first line is show conclusion, and in a direct derivation which this problem asks us to do, the next thing we do is to bring in the premises. So we'll bring in all three premises. We brought in the premises, good. The next thing to do is to look for inference rule applications, and in particular we're looking for, we want to see, what we're always aiming to do is to box and cancel. And we know we're going to box and cancel with direct derivation, and what that means is that we need to get not p on a line, and then on the next line we'll box and cancel with direct derivation. So we have not p on line 8, which is what we're trying to show. So that's what we say here. We say 8, direct derivation, and we're done. So what we're looking for is not p. So the first thing we want to do is check, do we already have not p? And of course we don't, but we also want to know, that's what our goal is. That's where our target is. If we're going on a road trip, we need to know where we're starting from, where we're going to, and then we can make our map, plan our route. And so similarly here, we need to know where we're starting from and where we're ending up. And we need to know when we've got there. If you're on your road trip and you drive past your destination, that's not good. Similarly here, we need to know, oh, not only have I arrived at my destination, in fact I have. What's my destination? Not P. Okay, so we're not at not P yet. We want to get there, and we're going to do that by using inference rules. And the main inference rules we're going to be concerned with are modus ponens and modus tollens, because they give us genuinely new things. So what do we need for modus ponens or modus tollens? Well, we need a conditional, and then either the antecedent of the conditional or the negation of its consequent. So we have two conditionals. We have a conditional on line 2, and we have a conditional on line 3. So if we look at the conditional on line 2, we ask, okay, well, so what is its antecedent? Its antecedent is whatever comes before the arrow. So the antecedent is P. That's what we need for modus ponens. We look around, we see, do we have P? No, we don't. So we can't do modus ponens. What do we need for modus tollens? Well, we need the consequent, but not just the consequent. We need the negation of the consequent. So we need not if Q then R. So we need, it's not the case that if Q is true, then R is also true. So we want to look around and see, do we have not if Q then R? And we don't. We don't have not if Q then R there, and we don't have not if Q then R there. So we can't do modus ponens with line 2, we can't do modus tollens with line 3, so line 2. So no modus ponens with line 2, no modus tollens with line 2, we can't use line 2 at all right now. So we're going to turn our attention to line 3. And again, we want to ask, can we do modus ponens? And what's the antecedent? Well, this is the main connective. The antecedent is whatever is on the left side of the main connective. So that is the antecedent. So again, we need to look up here and say, do we have if Q then R? Well, it's the consequent of line 2, but to do modus ponens, we need just the antecedent by itself on a line. If we're going to do modus ponens with 3, we need just that. We don't have just that anywhere. No modus ponens. What about modus tollens with line 3? Well, we need to find the consequent, so there's the main connective, and the consequent is everything after the main connective, so that's the consequent. So we need the negation of the consequent, so we need not S. Okay, so we want to look around and see, do we have not S everywhere? And we look at line 4 and we say, oh yes, we do. So we say 3, 4, modus tollens. We have conditional, and we have on one line, on line 3, and we have the negation of its consequent on the next line, and so we can apply modus tollens, and what do we get? We get the negation of the antecedent of line 3. So the antecedent of line 3 is if Q then R, and so we get not if Q then R. Good. So, good. But what's our goal? Well, let's think about it. We're trying to do a derivation. How do we finish derivations? We box and cancel. How are we going to box and cancel? In this case, we're going to box and cancel with direct derivation. What do we need to box and cancel with direct derivation? We need the conclusion. And what is that? It's not P. Do we have not P? No, we don't. So we can't box and cancel yet. That means we need to keep looking for inference rule applications. Okay? Well, again, we're looking to do modus ponens or modus tollens. We've used line 3. So we're not going to use it again. Once you use a line with modus ponens or modus tollens, you're done with it, basically, usually, normally. So So we want to consider, what about line 2? Because that's our other conditional line. Can we do modus ponens or modus tollens? Well, for modus ponens, we concluded we need P. Do we have P? No, we don't. So what about for modus tollens? Well, we need the negation of the consequent. And what's the consequent? The consequent is if Q then R. And so the negation of the consequent is not if Q then R. So we need, for modus tollens, we need not that. We need this. And oh look, that's what we have on line 5. So we can say 2, 5, modus tollens. And there's not P. Hey, that's what we were looking for. So that means that we are done. So there we go. So again, it's the same general strategy. Show the conclusion, list the premises, look for inference rule applications, specifically modus ponens or modus tollens, until we get the conclusion for direct derivation. Now, you might have a question about the modus tollens application, this one, that gets us line 6 with lines 5 and 2. So I want to just quickly explain here what's going on in slightly more detail. My printer just turned on for no reason. I don't know why. So, we're going to do modus tollens. So we need the negation of the consequent. Okay, so the consequent here is Q, right? So what do we need for modus tollens? We need not Q, and we can get not P. Okay, suppose we had, but this is, in this case, our consequent is simple. It's just a letter Q, but it could be bigger, right? So it could be not Q. So what would we need if we were going to do modus tollens with not Q? You might think, oh, we need Q. But that's not going to work. Why does that not work? Well, because strictly what the rule says you need is the consequent with a negation in front of it. And so what is the consequent with a negation in front of it? Well, that's the consequent, and that's the consequent with a negation in front of it. And so now we can do modus tollens, and we get not P. So whatever the consequent is, however big it is, the same rule applies. So suppose it was P, then not Q. What would you need? You would need not Q, the consequent, with a negation in front of it, modus tollens. But there's no reason why it has to be just modus tollens works whatever the consequent is. So if the consequent is a sentence letter, if you have the negation of the sentence letter, modus tollens works. If the consequent is a negation, if you have the negation of that negation, modus tollens works. If the consequent is a conditional, then again, if you have the negation of the consequent, then modus tollens works. And that's what we did in our case, right? So whatever the consequent is, whether it's Q or not Q or not Q or Q then R, if you have the negation. So if you have not Q or not Q or not Q or not if Q then R, whatever it is, if it's the negation of the consequent, you can apply modus tollens. So that's derivation 10004. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know.